In this lecture, I will briefly review major structures of a human brain. Almost anyone has some notion of what brain is. Most of us would say that only animals have brains and that these organs are the seats of intelligence. The only problems are that not all animals have brains, and we do not know what intelligence is. Nevertheless, we will take a good look at the parts of human brain. But first, let's take a look at a big picture of the nervous system. The nervous system has two main subdivisions: the central nervous system, brain and spinal cord, and the peripheral nervous system, paired spinal and cranial nerves. Central nervous system is integration and command center, while peripheral nervous system carries messages to and from spinal cord and brain. The brain is the main control center for the body's function and is the memory storehouse. It contains billions of neurons. The brain is located in the cranial cavity that composed of 8 bones that protect it. 2 parietal bones, 2 temporal bones, 1 frontal bone, 1 sphenoid bone, 1 ethmoid bone, and 1 occipital bone. The brain is composed of wrinkled pinkish gray tissue that is immersed in cerebrospinal fluid, which cushions the brain. You see it on this slide as a light blue color. Cerebral spinal fluid is a clear, colorless, watery fluid that flows in and around your brain and spinal cord. Cerebrospinal fluid acts like a cushion that helps you protect your brain and spinal cord from sudden impact or injury. Without cerebrospinal fluid, the brain will crush under its own weight because the consistency of the brain is like an oatmeal that some of us have in the morning for breakfast. The buoyancy keeps it in shape. The brain is kept buoyant by cerebrospinal fluid. This buoyancy is crucial for the brain to function properly. The fluid also removes waste product from the brain and keeps your central nervous system work properly. If a doctor thinks that you have illness that affects your nervous system, they might take a sample for testing. A sample of cerebrospinal fluid can be an important clue. It can tell your doctor if you have one of a number of conditions such as multiple sclerosis, when your body immune system attacks your nerves, or other similar conditions known as autoimmune diseases. Myelitis, inflammation of spinal cord, encephalitis, inflammation of brain cells, meningitis, inflammation of thin tissue that cover and protect your brain and spinal cord. This usually is caused by infection in the cerebrospinal fluid. Another condition that can be determined by analyzing cerebrospinal fluid is a stroke or similar condition that causes bleeding around your brain. Leukemia, a kind of blood cancer. Dementia is a general term for the impaired ability to remember, think, or make decisions that interferes with doing everyday activities. The brain is surrounded by membranes called meninges, which protects and nourish it. There are 3 distinct meninges. By the way, the singular of meninges is meninges. So there are 3 distinct meninges: dura mater, arachnoid mater, and pia mater. Dura means tough. Mater means mother. So the membrane that surrounds brain called tough mother. It is tough membrane of connective tissue. Students that do brain dissection first have to free the brain from the dura mater. They know how tough it is to cut through it. Arachnoid means spider or spider-like. And the mater, as you already know, is mother. Why is this membrane that wraps the brain called arachnoid mater? Well, because it looks like a spider web over the brain. The next membrane or mother under the arachnoid mater is pia mater. Pia means gentle. Pia mater clings so close to the brain that it is impossible to separate it from the brain. It is very thin and it rips off easily. So far we established what protects our brain. That is cranial bones, 8 of them, meninges, 3 different types, and cerebrospinal fluid. On this slide, you see a side view of the human brain. You see the left side of the brain. The largest part of human brain is the cerebrum. The cerebrum is present in all vertebrates, but it assumes particular importance in humans. In some animals, it may serve essentially as an elaborate refinement to implement behavior that could be performed in some degree without it. In more advanced animals, it takes on a more functional importance. For example, if the cerebrum of the frog is removed, the frog will show relatively little changes in behavior. If it is turned upside down, it will right itself. If it is touched with an irritant, it will scratch. It will even catch a fly. Also, sexual behavior in frogs can occur without use of the brain, but I will try not to extrapolate from that. Rats are more developed on their cerebral cortex. A rat that is surgically deprived of its cerebrum can visually distinguish only light and dark. Also, its patterns of body movement seem unimpaired. A cat with its cerebrum removed can meow and purr, swallow and move to avoid pain, but its movements are sluggish and robot-like. A monkey whose cerebral cortex have been removed is severely paralyzed and can barely distinguish light and dark. The results in humans is total blindness and almost complete paralysis. Although such person can breathe and swallow, they soon die. This is apparent that cerebrum is more than just a center of intelligence. It seems that from the evolutionary standpoint, more and more of the functions of the lower brain have been transferred to the cerebrum. Cerebrum comprises most of your brain and consists of right cerebral hemisphere and left cerebral hemisphere. Right cerebral hemisphere governs functions for the left side of the body, and the left cerebral hemisphere governs functions for the right side of the body. The cerebellum is the part of the brain in the back of the head between the cerebrum and the brainstem. It controls balance for walking and standing and other complex motor functions. The brainstem looks like a flower stalk or stem and consists of 3 major sections. Midbrain is the top part of the brainstem. Its function is to regulate eye movements. Pons is the middle part of the brainstem. It coordinates facial movements, hearing, and balance. Medulla oblongata is the bottom part of the brain stem. It helps regulate breathing, heart rhythms, blood pressure, and swallowing. Cerebrum is divided into 2 parts by longitudinal fissure. Longitudinal fissure is a deep groove that marks the division between left and right cerebral hemispheres of the brain. At the bottom of the groove, the hemispheres are connected by corpus callosum. You will see this structure on other diagram. Here is the section of the brain that was cut off. You can see that the gray matter makes up the outermost layer of the brain. The gray matter gets its gray tone from a high concentration of neural cell bodies. White matter is found in the deeper tissue of the brain. It contains nerve fibers, axons, which are extensions of nerve cells, neurons. Many of these nerve fibers are surrounded by a type of sheath or covering called myelin. Myelin gives the white matter its color. The white matter and gray matter are similar as they both essential sections of both the brain as well as the spinal cord. Wrinkled surface of the brain increases the surface area of the brain, that is to say, the cortex area. The surface anatomy of the cerebrum includes 5 lobes. The frontal lobe, also known as motor lobe, controls emotional expressions and moral and ethical behavior. The parietal lobe helps to evaluate general senses. The temporal lobe is the auditory area of the brain. The occipital lobe is the visual area of the brain. The insula, also known as insular cortex, is deep in the folds of the cortex. This is why you cannot identify this lobe looking at the surface anatomy of the brain. It is inside the brain. It has multiple functions, including integrating information about the state of the body. Broca's and Wernicke's area are language areas of the brain. The Broca's area is motor speech area that directs muscles of the tongue and is active as one prepares to speak. It is usually present in the left hemisphere. Because of the Wernicke's area, we can say unfamiliar words aloud. Another important part of your brain is diencephalon. Diencephalon consists of two major structures, thalamus and hypothalamus. The diencephalon acts as a primary relay and processing center for sensory information and autonomic control. Thalamus is located in the center of the cranial cavity, directly beneath the cerebrum and above the hypothalamus. The thalamus is composed of two egg-shaped masses of gray matter covered in a thin layer of white matter. It is a relay point and processing center for all sensory impulses except the sense of smell. The thalamus is linked to the cerebral cortex. The motor, visual, and auditory system play a significant role in arousal, wakefulness, and alertness. Hypothalamus is located below the thalamus. It lies in the heart of the limbic system, the emotional part of the brain. It is the autonomic control center. What does this mean? It means that the hypothalamus is the main visceral control center. It means that you do not have to think about your internal organs. It regulates blood pressure, the rate and force of heartbeat, digestive tract motility, the rate and depth of breathing, and eye pupil size. It is the center for emotional response. It influences perception of pleasure, fear, and rage, and biological rhythms and drives such as sex drive. It is body temperature regulator, the body's thermostat, cooling, sweating, or heat retention mechanisms, shivering, all controlled by hypothalamus. The regulation of a food intake regulates feeling of hunger and satiety. Hypothalamus is also a regulator of water balance and thirst. The same condition also stimulates hypothalamic neurons in the thirst center that cause us feel thirsty. Hypothalamus is a regulator of sleep-wake cycles, helps regulate sleep through the operation of its suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is our biological clock. It responds to daylight and darkness cues received from the visual pathways. Hypothalamus controls endocrine system functioning. It controls hormone release via pituitary gland. We will talk about this when we discuss endocrine system. Knowing of what I just went over, try to answer the question, what would the homeostatic imbalance in the hypothalamus cause? Pause the video if you have to. As I stated earlier, hypothalamus regulates feelings of hunger and satiety. So if there are homeostatic imbalance in hypothalamus, this may lead to a condition known as hypothalamic obesity. It is a type of obesity that is caused when the hypothalamus does not function normally. I also said that hypothalamus is the key that turns our emotions into our physical responses. Anger, excitement, fear, stress are all responses generated in reaction to thoughts, impulses, or some stimuli in our surroundings. Therefore, homeostatic imbalance in the hypothalamus might cause emotional disturbance. When we will get old, we will lose sense of thirst because our hypothalamus will not work properly. Many old people die of dehydration. Hypothalamus regulates sleep-wake cycles, so no wonder if there are homeostatic imbalance in hypothalamus, one might end up with insomnia. The frontal lobe is right where you would expect to find it, at the front of the cerebrum, just behind the forehead. This is the part that people hit with the heel of the palm when they suddenly remember what they forgot. So, where is it on the diagram? If you find the anterior or frontal area of the brain, you know where it is. Not long ago, parts of the frontal lobe were surgically removed in efforts to bring the behavior of certain aberrant individuals more into line with the norm. Fortunately, this practice has been largely discontinued. The name of the procedure was lobotomy. Parietal lobe lies directly behind the frontal lobe. I hope you identified it right away. The lobe contains the sensory areas of the skin receptors and also the areas that direct bodily position. Even if you cannot see your feet right now, you have an idea of where they are, thanks to the receptors in parietal lobe. Damage to the parietal lobe may cause numbness, but it can also cause a person to perceive his or her own body as widely distorted. In addition, the person may suffer from an inability to perceive spatial relationships in the environment. At the back is the occipital lobe, which receives and analyzes visual information. If this lobe is injured, black holes appear in the part of the visual field that is registered in that area. The temporal lobe is at the side of the brain. It roughly resembles the thumb of the boxing glove. The temporal lobe shares in the processing of visual information, but its main function is auditory reception. Towards the back of the head is the cerebellum, which is concerned with balance, equilibrium, and coordination. The pons, which is the portion of the stem brain just above the medulla oblongata, connects the cerebellum and the cerebral cortex, the famed gray matter. Medulla oblongata is just above spinal cord. It is specialized as a control center for such function as breathing and heartbeat. And the last structure on the diagram you recognized without difficulty. It is not part of the brain, it is the spinal cord. The spinal cord extends downward from the base of your brain. It is made up of nerve cells and group of nerves that carry impulses between your brain and the rest of your body. What you see on this slide is the mid-sagittal section of the human brain. Question: what cerebral hemisphere you see on the slide? Is it a left cerebral hemisphere or right cerebral hemisphere? Of course, this is the right cerebral hemisphere with its convoluted cortex and most of the structures directly below. How about this structure? I mentioned this structure earlier. You're correct if you said corpus callosum. It is primary route of communication between the right and left cerebral hemispheres. It should be pointed out that the certain degree of compensation is possible between the two halves of the brain. For example, if one hand is injured, it is possible to learn to use other hand. So in spite of the natural handedness you were born with, retraining is possible. As muscles controlling movement of other hand develop, the neural events in the opposite side of the brain begin to permit the efficient use of that hand. It has also been demonstrated that if one hemisphere of child's brain is injured, the other side will take over some of its tasks. The fornix, from Latin arch, is a C-shaped bundle of nerve fibers in the brain. The fornix acts as the major output tract of the hippocampus, which plays a major role in learning and memory. The fornix arching around the thalamus and connecting the medial temporal lobes to the hypothalamus. The fornix plays an important role in the formation and consolidation of declarative memories. Declarative memory consists of facts and events that can be consciously recalled or declared. For example, remembering names of your teachers, professors, and friends, certain dates, the math formulas. It is all type of declarative memory, sometimes called explicit memory. The thalamus is rather unpoetically called gray relay station of the brain, consists of densely packed clusters of neurons, which presumably provide connections between various parts of the brain. All information from your body's senses except smell must be processed through your thalamus before being sent to the brain's cerebral cortex for interpretation. Your thalamus also plays a role in sleep, wakefulness, consciousness, learning, and memory. The hypothalamus is a small body densely packed with cells, which is extremely important in regulating the internal environment as well as certain general aspects of behavior. As we have discussed earlier, the hypothalamus helps control heart rate, blood pressure, and body temperature. It also plays a part in the regulation of the pituitary gland, and it controls such basic drives as hunger, thirst, sex, and rage. Experimental stimulation of various centers in the hypothalamus by means of electrodes can cause cat to act hungry, angry, cold, hot, benign, or horny. The olfactory bulb is an essential structure in olfactory system, the system devoted to the sense of smell. Olfactory bulbs are rounded masses of tissue that contains several types of nerve cells that are involved in the sense of smell. There are two olfactory bulbs in the bottom of each of the side of the brain, one above each nasal cavity. Pituitary is the major endocrine gland, a pea-sized body attached to the base of the brain. The pituitary is important in controlling growth and development and functioning of the other endocrine glands. This will be discussed in the lecture on the endocrine system. I have no doubt you all recognize cerebellum, pons, and medulla oblongata. The last two are part of brainstem. Because the brainstem controls essential life functions, someone who experiences brainstem death cannot regain consciousness. Brainstem death means a person has no brainstem functions. It occurs when something permanently damages the brainstem or cuts off the brain's blood or oxygen supply. People with brainstem death need artificial life support to remain alive. This condition is sometimes called brain death. The last structure on the slide is a spinal cord, which will be covered in the future lecture.